This is Tim Staten in Stating the Obvious, where we make sense of leadership principles and turn them into relatable everyday actions that could enhance or improve your leadership style. This is Tim Staten with Stating the Obvious. In the last couple weeks, we talked about a framework for building high-performing teams. And we started out with trust, then we moved on to healthy conflict, and last week we talked about commitment to the team. And this is the fourth topic in the series of team-building principles, and that topic is accountability to the team and how to hold people accountable. Have you ever worked somewhere where you were committed to the team, you trusted the people you worked with, and you had high hopes with working for them, you were excited, you were energetic about it, and things were going great, and then all of a sudden you looked around and you were like, wait a minute, other people aren't pulling their weight. Other people are letting other people on the team down. Why is standards being applied unfairly or even unevenly? So this goes into people not being held accountable. So the key question here this week is, why is accountability so important, and how do we improve or instill this in our organizations where it doesn't exist? In this episode, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about accountability and why it's important. A lot of people I work with talk about accountability and how it's important. However, when we take a closer look at it, it may not be applied across the board. Other people may not buy into it. So how do we get organizational accountability when we're building teams? This is the part where I take a break from talking and make a couple of plugs and ask you to do a couple of things. The first thing I want to do is say thank you so much for checking out this podcast and downloading it. We are just over 200 independent downloads, and I think that is really awesome, and I couldn't have done it without your help and support. So this week, I want to see how much more we can share this podcast. So if you could, share it with one or two other people that you think might like the show and like the topics that we're talking about. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast, please do, and rate us. It helps us keep the show visible on iTunes and on Podbean, where people can't see it, and because it keeps it on the forefront. So if they don't know about us, it keeps it up there. The other thing is that I've added these weekly podcasts to YouTube on Tim Stating the Obvious. So if you can't download it on Podbean or iTunes, you can go to YouTube and listen to it from there. And that's another great way where you can subscribe and get updates on that. And also on September 11th, we're going to do another YouTube live session with my buddy of mine, Bobby Withers, and we're going to talk about volunteer leadership. So I look forward to, one, you sharing this podcast with somebody else that you think might like it, and then two, you joining us on September 11th for the YouTube live session. This week we're talking about accountability. It starts off in everything that you do, from creating standards and publishing standards, publishing goals, clear objectives, and letting people know what our organization is about and what we're trying to do. So when we hold each other accountable on our team, right? So we back up to trust, right? So we've clearly established that we're here for the betterment of the team and that we're trusting each other to do what they're supposed to be doing. And when they're not doing it, then this goes into accountability piece. We got to trust that other people are going to police each other up, like peer policing and then subordinate policing. And what I mean by policing is just talking to each other and going, hey man, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I need you to step up to the team, right? So what that does is that creates an atmosphere where it's a healthy conflict, where it creates enough pressure for people who are underperforming to rise to the occasion and perform at a higher level. When I was younger, I used to play for a traveling baseball team. We used to travel all over the state and play other teams. We had a peer player who was on the team, and he was a stellar baseball player. I mean, he could run, he could throw the ball, he was actually an outfielder, and a lot of people may think that an outfielder is not that critical, but Actually, outfielders are extremely critical because they have to cover the most ground and catch the balls as they're in the air, and those lead to the most outs, not the infielders so much. So he was an incredible baseball player. However, he was letting his grades drop. So his dad one time, showed up to practice and told a lot of the other kids, unbeknownst to the player, that, hey, this is probably his last practice session because he's not going to play anymore because his grades are dropping below a 2.0 average. And if his grades don't get any higher, he ain't playing anymore. Well, we understood it that as a team that it was going to be detrimental if we lost one of our key players. So what we started to do was we policed each other up. We talked to him. We said, hey, look, man, are you just not applying yourself in school? Are you just not studying? Do you not care? Like, what's going on? And it come to find out that he was just playing baseball too much and he wasn't focusing on the right things. And we said, look, man, your dad said you're not going to be able to play anymore if you don't get your studies straight. So get your studies straight so that way you can continue to play and contribute to the team. If not, the team is going to suffer because we're not going to be as good without you. Yes, there's someone who can fill your position, but you are a prime starter. So therefore, you are the better player and we need you on the team. Not to mention you can hit the ball better than anybody else on the team, so let's go ahead and get after this. So we talked to each other and we would help him with questions that he was studying throughout practice and incorporate that into practice to help him out, and his grade point average improved because he realized that the rest of the team was relying on him to do that. So when you take a look at what the principles we talked about were like, he felt the pressure to rise to the occasion academically, not necessarily on the field, but academically so he could continue to play. We identified the problems that he just wasn't paying enough attention to his studies because he was playing baseball. So we incorporated studying into baseball so that he can continue. And then eventually we developed that mutual respect amongst each other because he knew that we were there to help him accomplish his goals so he could continue to play. And also for the fact that, he needed to contribute to the team on the field as well. And he realized how valuable he was. When I look forward to the organizations that we're in now, as we grow older, those standards and those principles still apply. They're just differently. Sometimes you've got to pull someone aside and say, hey, man, I know you may have a lot of personal problems at the house, but I need you to focus while you're at work. And if you need us to get you the resources to take care of your home life, we can do that because you're a value member of the team. So we need you to perform here because you are distracted. Maybe you have to pull someone aside and let them know that they're not performing as well as they think they're performing and tell them that they've got to rise to the occasion. Those principles go hand in hand and they apply across all ages and all boundaries. When we look at those that, teams that hold each other accountable, and then now let's take a look at teams that don't hold each other accountable. I think a lot of people have been on both types of organizations and employments where you have those that do hold people accountable and you have those that don't hold people accountable. So when you have people who are not holding people accountable, it creates a resentment amongst other team members because there's appears to be a double standard if it's not evenly applied, right? So like for instance, if you're constantly showing up to work every day on time and you're like, yep, I'm at it, I'm getting after it, I'm clocking in on time, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but somebody else comes in and he's always like 10 to 15 minutes late and nothing's ever said to that person, that could build resentment amongst people over time. It's something small, but if you think about it this way, if you get up in the morning, you got your workout regimen in the morning, then you got to get your kids ready for school if you have kids, or take care of your stuff that you got to take care of. Get them to daycare. Do whatever it is you got to do to take care of your home life and your family life. Go through rush hour. Go through traffic. Get some breakfast. Get into work on time. Somebody else may be going through the same struggles you're going through, but you found a way to get there on time, and that means a lot to you because punctuality is important to the team. Whereas somebody else is just going through it and can't figure out how to get there on time. So over a period, that can build resentment amongst team members because they're like, hey, you're not showing up every day on time. So you obviously don't care about the team as much as I care about the team. Who cares? You don't really know everyone's backstory, but that could be the perception. And because that's a double standard, it's not evenly applied, it could encourage mediocrity to build among the team. Meaning, why should I work so hard at something because other people aren't working as hard and they're not rising to the occasion and they're not being high performers and they're getting paid the same amount as I am. So why should I work harder? That mentality could set in if people aren't held accountable. Also, it places burdens on other people, right? So like for instance, maybe I don't care about how somebody else works, but I'm going to work as hard as I can because that's what I do and that's who I am, and I'm going to give everything I got to the team. And if other people aren't pulling their weight on the team, I'm going to pull their weight for them because I want the team to succeed at all costs. So I'm going to do what I got to do to make sure it all works out. So that places a burden on a person who is like that. Also, if you're the leader of this organization, it can place a incredible burden on you because now you got to figure out how to get those non-performers to perform and those who are performing higher than others to take on other people's tasks to get the task accomplished on time. A lot of people don't want to, you may not want to talk about it as a realistic fact, but a lot of employees I know get burned out because they're too busy doing their job and somebody else's job just to help the team out and move the team forward. And their mentality is, well, I'm going to do this because I know it's going to pay off in the long run because they're going to see that I'm a team player and I'm going to work hard. That may be true, but you're also placing an undue burden upon yourself and others because you're not holding people accountable to the team. So what I like to do in real life application to this of accountability is I clearly define when I am at work what the standards are, what our goals are, what our objectives are, and what our timelines are. And we have meetings throughout the week, right? So I have daily check-ins where I have my immediate reports really early in the morning, probably earlier than they want to do it. We do a telecon, and they talk about the 3 things that they're going to do that's really important that day to get done towards those goals and objectives to meet those timelines. And if it's something that I think needs some course correction because it's not in line with what I think is important at the time, then I'm going to adjust those accordingly and then let them know, hey, this is for the betterment of the team, so this is what we need to get done instead. Also, I don't ever walk by a standard that's not done correctly without making an on-the-spot correction. So, for example, if I see someone coming in late, since I used the example earlier in the show about being punctual and timely to work, I'll pull that individual aside and make sure that everything's going okay on their personal life and that, there's no real drastic need on why they were late. And 9 times out of 10, it's not. They just didn't plan out their day correctly. And then I will make the on-the-spot correction. I'll say, hey, look, I'm going to let your supervisor know that you showed up late, and we're going to work out a plan of action and make sure that you can manage your time correctly so that you can come in on time. It's not that I'm a punctuality, overbearing micromanager leader on this portion of it, but it's important that we all show up to work on time so we can all get to work at the same time doing the things that we need to do, moving forward together as a team. And if you can't show up on time, then we've got to find a way to make sure that we replace you with somebody else who can, if you demonstrate over a period of time that you can do it. On another note, so another thing with on-the-spot corrections, let's say someone's completing a task and they're not doing it to the right safety standards, right? Let's say someone doesn't want to wear their hard hat while they're on a work site, or someone doesn't want to wear the proper protective gloves, whether it be latex or leather gloves while they're working on something. Well, those rules and regulations are put in place to protect employees from getting hurt. If that employee doesn't want to do it because they don't like it, that's not their choice to make. Because if they get hurt, now they're out of work, and now they can't contribute to the team because their own hard-headedness prevented them from wearing the protective equipment when they were supposed to wear it. Now somebody else is going to have to pick up the slack and do their job for them. So even the small things, as far as putting together, protective gear, wearing that so that way you can be safe. If you are a leader and you let that go by unnoticed, well, now you're perpetuating a new standard of, I saw somebody doing it correctly, I let it go. It must be okay in this organization for that to happen. So we just need to make on-the-spot corrections. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but if you see it, you can say, hey, I know you're working on this and I'm really glad you're doing it, but it's also really important that we do it safely and to standards. So please make the following corrections, right? I don't know how many times I have seen middle manager and lower levels of leadership not make those corrections when they see it. And it takes senior leaders who come out on the site to make those corrections. Those things are the ones that drive accountability on teams. If you start out with the small things, those will build up to the larger things. So if I can trust you with the small things and I'm going to hold you accountable to them, then I can trust you on the bigger things. That's just how these things work out. After we hold people accountable and we're talking about what the right thing to do is and we get the right responses back that we're looking for, we need to make sure that we positively reinforce that behavior. I am not a fan of negative reinforcement on any type of level, because I think that draws a negative mindset into organizations. So negativity begets negativity. So when I see people doing the right things, what they're supposed to be doing, and we're holding people accountable, and if I see people making the right on the spot corrections, then I will praise that person in public. Say, hey, this guy over here, this gal over here saw something unsafe and they made an on the spot correction, and now we're all safe. So now we can all work together as a team. That's an awesome job. Thank you for doing that. Or even put people in for monetary rewards or organizational rewards so that they can be publicly recognized for the behaviors that they're supposed to, that you're looking for, right? Also, I give people time off. So if I see the things that I'm looking for and people are doing the right things, then I will reward that with time off, because sometimes it ain't about the money. Sometimes you just want the time off to spend it with your family, or you just want to go to the store, or you just wanted to go to the beach on a Friday, or you just want to go to the mountains on a Friday instead of going into work. I'm all for that. But you got to, show me that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and then that gets rewarded, with positive reinforcement. So when we look at accountability and standards, the examples I gave were small, and I chose small examples for this week's episode because they're minuscule. And typically as leaders, we overlook the small things. But I think if you start to pay attention to the small things with accountability, you'll see greater buy-in on the large scale accountability, on the things that you really care about. Things that get checked by leaders get done. If you want to see people holding each other accountable and that culture to really cultivate in your organizations, start out with the small things on accountability and start holding people accountable to that, and you'll see that grow over the time. I want to thank you for listening to today's episode of Tim Stating the Obvious, where we talked about developing accountability into teams. I would like to ask one thing of you, if I could, before we close out. Please subscribe, comment, and share this podcast with one or two other people that might like this show, and provide some feedback. I like to hear what I can do better and make this show into something what you want to listen to. It's not about me behind the microphone just talking, because I can do that all day. It's about generating a discussion, getting topics out there, getting your feedback, because we all come from different walks of life. We all come from different work backgrounds. We all have different leadership styles and principles. And I want to hear what your thoughts on it are, so that way we can have a discussion about it and grow as individuals. So how can you do that? Well, you can start out with our Facebook page at Tim Stating the Obvious, and then share a comment there. You can look it on our iTunes, our Podbean, our Google Play Store, and now on YouTube, you can listen to a video and make a comment there, and hopefully gain other people's comments as well, and have that discussion. So I really appreciate you checking out this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Come back for another one. I'm Tim Stating, stating the obvious.